This is the Albuquerque Business Podcast with your host, Jason Rigby. Each week, we interview leading local business leaders to inspire the vision and spirit that is in every entrepreneur, discussing strengths, weakness, strategies, systems, and the problems we can all solve together to fulfill a shared vision of a new future for Albuquerque.
Hi, my name is Jason Rigby, and welcome to the Albuquerque Business Podcast. Today on our show, we have a very special guest. I don't want to give away, but he is a pastor of a church here in Albuquerque, so don't tune me out because you heard the word pastor. We're going to talk about leadership. We're going to talk about nonprofits and for volunteering, what that means. How do you get people to come to church every day? You know, those things we're all going to get into, so stick around on that. I want to thank our sponsors. This podcast is brought to you by 99.9 The Beat FM. The show is on Sundays from 4 to 5, so I encourage you to listen to that. Also, you can stream at 99thebeatfm.com. That's 99thebeatfm.com. And I also want to thank Duke City Marketing. You can go to that website, www.dukecitymarketing.com. That's www.dukecitymarketing.com. If you're looking at doing Snapchat ads, Instagram story ads, Facebook, whatever it is, please don't hesitate to contact them. Well, I want to introduce to the show today, we have Pastor Matt Williams from City Church. Is that right?
That's correct.
Oh, perfect. And let's go ahead and start off because I want people to know exactly what's your Instagram?
So my personal Instagram is the.matthew.williams is my personal Instagram, but you can follow me there, or you can follow me at the church, which is CCABQ is our Instagram,
right,
and our website is ccabq.com.
Perfect. Well, I kind of want to get into you a little bit today about leadership because it's important. A lot of people don't realize a pastor has to, you have to lead hundreds of people, and in that process also have to make sure, that it's amazing to me. A lot of people don't look at, it's a large organization when you go through the amount of people that you have to talk to and everything that you have to do. Can you describe a little bit about, we'll start from the beginning from the church. I know we talked earlier, you were a pastor's son.
That's correct. Yeah. So I was a pastor's son, and I grew up in a pastor's home. And in that process, I used to watch what my dad did for a living, and I thought, there's no way I'm going to do this. Like, nobody in their right mind would ever choose to do this. And so I went into business, and I've been in business most of my life.
Right. Been
an entrepreneur, self-starter, self-employed most of my life, and done different fields in there.
Right.
And then one day, I guess in the Christian world, they call it the call, right? There's a calling, if you will.
Right.
Like there's a calling to be a pastor. And one day I just woke up and I just knew that God was calling me to be a pastor. And my logical mind was like, this is insane. But there was a faith side of me that said, you know what? I really believed that God was telling me to go and do this. And I think if you're going to be a pastor, you have to have a level of faith to believe it.
Right.
Honestly, to be a business owner and an entrepreneur, there are so much self-doubt that happens in the middle of owning a business.
Yeah, that's true.
You have to have like a belief inside of you that I was born for this. Whatever it is that you're doing, if you don't have that belief, especially as an entrepreneur, you've got to have it. Otherwise, your self-doubt will kill you and cripple you. And so you have to always fall back on that. Well, I believe that I was called to this, or I believe that this is what my purpose is here on earth.
I think there's a lot of parallels to entrepreneur and a pastor too. In the way that the job functions that you guys do.
Yeah, for sure. I think so I have paid staff at the church.
Right.
So that would be like an employee. But the tricky part, which I didn't understand fully until I started really doing this, is I have 280. I just looked, 282 volunteers that serve in our church that are unpaid. So
wow.
How do you motivate 282 people to do something free of charge?
Right.
That as an employee, it's like, I'm writing you a paycheck, so you're going to do it. And if you don't like what they're doing, eventually you fire them, you write up, you have like write-ups and and you do it through the process of disciplinary action, and you fire them, and then you hire somebody else to do the job.
Right.
Hopefully someone has the skills and the qualifications, but the church is a volunteer organization. It just is. There's very few paid staff, and it's primarily volunteer. So how do you get 282 people to do what needs to get done in order for the organization to move forward. And I got to tell you, that was been tricky in the beginning.
Yeah, and I think, and I think this is something that a lot of people struggle with. You'll even have little nonprofits that will have 4 or 5 volunteers, and they struggle with those volunteers. So everyone needs to listen, because this is really important. Yeah, you have a faith aspect of it, but still there's work that has to be done, and you have to lead those people. Now describe, like on the leadership side of things with these volunteers, describe what type of leadership do you like to model? Where do you go with that?
So there's a couple different things that I would say there. One is that I treat my volunteers like staff people. In fact, there's my upper level of volunteers, my top, because it's a multi-tiered organization,
right,
just like any business would be. But my top tier, they're volunteers, but I call them my staff. And we have staff meetings, and we had a staff retreat, went up to Santa Fe and did a big staff retreat over the weekend, and just like you would do in a normal business with your top people and casting
right,
vision and leadership. And then the other side of it is that when it's dealing with volunteers, and probably with business too, I've taken the approach of servant leadership in the sense that if you look at it, traditional leadership is the guy at the top, is the important person, and everybody that underneath of him is starting to serve that person. Well, in servant leadership, it's the other way around. And in servant leadership, it's the front line is the most important, and I'm here to serve. So I'm technically on the org chart, I'm the guy at the top, but my job is to serve my staff. I have 12 people that I consider staff. So I have 12 people that so my job is to serve them, and their job is to serve the people that are in their departments, all the way through to the front line. And so, for example, when you show up and visit, if you visit any church, but my church in particular, the first thing you're going to encounter is some people right around the front door, maybe out in the sidewalk out front, something like that. And we call those guys our greeters, and they're going to greet you and say, "Hey, man, welcome. So glad that you're here." Well, that person's a volunteer, and they show up and they are prepared and they're ready, and and that person is the most important person, not me. And so even all the way out to the front line extension of our organization, the front line is the most important. And so I have a commitment that I have to put my volunteers first, and their commitment is that they're going to put the customer first. So I put them first, and they put the customer first. So if they don't have to be territorial about their own well-being,
right,
because I am so committed to their well-being,
right,
I'm serving them in every way that I can find a way to serve them.
It just organically happens.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And in business, it's kind of similar.
Yeah, it is.
The guy at the top,
exactly
if you say,
similar,
well, I've got my 10 or 12 people that are my inner circle, and man, if I tell them, listen, my job as the CEO of the organization is to serve you to the best of my ability to help you perform at your best. And then you tell them, listen, I'm doing this for you, and I need you to do this for your team.
Right.
You create a culture of servant leadership all the way through. And then when your customers are interacting with the front line of your employee, your customers feel the value because it came from the top all the way through the organization.
I like that. You said something about a Santa Fe trip, and then you said something, and pastors take this for granted. Business leaders don't do this. You guys are experts at that. And you mentioned 3 words as casting vision.
Yeah.
So what does that look like? Like I know you as a pastor. I've been in churches where pastors have talked about that, and they, cast a vision for 2019, that type of thing. How could a business owner do that to motivate their employees and to take the direction where they need to go in the business?
I think at the end of the day, everyone wants to be part of something that's bigger than themselves.
That's good.
Whether that's in business or in a church or in a nonprofit. And if they're not finding that at work, like if they're just punching papers and doing mundane tasks at work, they're not going to find fulfillment in that.
Right.
And so they're going to find that fulfillment somewhere. And they're going to, if they don't, they'll be frustrated individuals. And so they got to find that somewhere. But as a leader in an organization, whether it's business or church, if you can provide that, you end up providing a very rich, fulfilling experience. And if you can connect the paper pushing to the greater vision.
Yeah, right.
Right? Like paper pushing is no fun. Standing at the front door greeting people at my church, I don't know. Maybe that's fun for some people. There's guys that show up early and they make coffee, right? They brew pots, and I don't know how many pots of coffee they make every week. We give away coffee. You can show up, get free coffee, and enjoy the service we do. But But there's people that get up early. Like, people don't get up and show up to church an hour early or however early they show up to make coffee. Like, that isn't fun for them. But I don't know. Maybe it is fun for them. But they don't show up because of that.
Right.
They show up because they're bought into the bigger vision.
Mm-hmm.
And so for us, like right now, the vision that we have is that we're going to be a church of all ages that are reaching the next generation.
I like that.
They're a church of all ages reaching the next generation. And so we see that there's a young generation that's coming right now that they need leadership and they need help. They need parenting. And I hate to say it, but the American family is not like it used to be.
Right.
And there's a lot of dysfunction. And there's dysfunction in my family. Honestly, we're all dysfunctional. If you get to know me, you'll know that I'm a little dysfunctional myself.
Yeah, we're all humans.
Right? We're all humans. There's dysfunction in every one of us. But we have the next generation is growing up in a situation. It's like, well, you know what? They don't need people to point out their dysfunction. They just need people to love them. And so if we can get all ages reaching the next generation, guess what? We're going to have a better community. We'll have a better city. We'll have a better church. We'll have better families. We'll have better everything, really, because the next generation is what is going to build our community and our country. And so we're going to be at that church that's going to be reaching the next generation.
I love that. Don't point out their dysfunction. Just love them.
I think have that.
Yeah, any business owner could take that and use that for their business. They don't realize that it's a family that they have.
Right.
That business. And like the church, it would be amazing to me if a business owner would, and that's why I love the parallels, because as you guys lead, it would be interesting to me to see a business owner take that same servant leadership, loving model and display it in their business and see what would happen.
Yeah, I think it's very relatable in a lot of ways for businesses and
right.
Yep, absolutely.
So I want to get back a little bit for here in Albuquerque. So are you born and raised here, or?
No, I'm originally from Portland, Oregon.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, so
I know right where that's at.
Yeah, so I'm kind of a Northwest kid, and I was born there, and I spent a little bit of time in Florida, then back to Oregon. And then when my family moved here, when I was going into high school.
Oh, okay.
And my father became the pastor of the church that I now serve at. But he was the pastor there for 25 years. Oh, wow. And I just helped out. There was like, I'm just going to help him out, where I can. Right. And so then one day when he said, well, I just feel like it's maybe my season's done here after 25 years of serving in the same church, which is a record. I don't know if you know pastoral.
Right.
Yeah. And it's typically a
3 to 5 years.
Yes,
or something,
typically a 3 to 5 year span. It's they don't stick around off very long, and
right.
And so for my dad to serve in the same place for 25 years was pretty significant.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And I had a car lot at the time. So,
oh, really?
Yeah, I had a little used car lot, and
that's awesome.
30 cars.
So okay, now we have so we have a pastor with a used car lot. That's fun.
There's like this devil on one shoulder and angel on the other, and you can pick which one's the devil and the angel. But the car lot was, it was a stark contrast.
It's an interesting parallel because my my father was in the car business and then became a pastor. So
really,
yeah, that was interesting. Yeah,
that is interesting.
Maybe there's something with the devil and the angel, like you said.
Right.
But so you ended up you were selling used cars.
Yep.
And then so was it around that time you felt the calling to go?
Yeah. So what's kind of funny is my dad went and told the board, hey, I'm he's in his mid-60s. He's like, it's probably about time for me to transition out of this, and maybe time for a new, younger voice to come in. And so the board actually approached me and said, would you be interested in doing this? And without saying anything, without even thinking about it, immediately I said, no, I'm not interested. And they said, oh, okay. And then a couple of days later, they came back and said, well, we really think you should at least consider it. Like, have you prayed about it? And that's the Christian thing, right? You should pray about it. So. So I said, no, I haven't prayed about it, because I think there's some things you don't need to pray about. And, so my wife and I went back and we prayed about it, and we discussed it, and we thought, well, you know what? We really felt like the Lord was leading us to do it. And I I'm a round peg in a square hole.
Right.
As far as the church world is concerned, I don't fit the norms. and I don't fit the molds and the stereotypes of what a pastor should be. But we really felt like the Lord was leading, so we sold the car lot. And
well, they must have thought something in you. I mean, there had to have been something there for them to see that, even though you're different than. I mean, we have all these stereotypes of pastors, but and everybody's different. So I never understood that.
Yeah, it's true, right? We all have stereotypes of everything. In fact,
what do you think that they saw in you? That's an interesting question, I think.
Oh man, it's a tough question. I'm not 100% certain. Some of it was probably leadership,
right?
Leadership ability. I know that I am strong in that area with leadership, and so I would say my leadership gifts and skills have been what's helped me a lot. I'm not very strong in the like pastoral type skills, gifting and skills, and and that's
you probably have people that help you in that arena.
I do, because like there's things like going to the hospital and visiting people and praying for them.
Right.
Like that's part of what a pastor should do for people. Right. I don't particularly enjoy that.
No one wants to go to a hospital.
Well, actually, there are people that want to go to the hospital and they want to love on people and care for them and pray for them. And I have a handful of people in my church that love to do that. And so we've got them as a team. We've organized it. They get dispatched text messages. They go, hey, so-and-so's in the hospital.
That's awesome.
This hospital, this room.
Right.
Go check it out and let us know what's going on. And so I have a coordinator that helps with that. And so that person goes out and like praying with them. Listen, they're doing pretty good. They're going home in so many days or whatever. And so we're able to kind of keep tabs on people to help encourage them. We send them flowers or whatever it needs to be that needs to happen. And so there's people that love to do it. And I got to tell you, the people in the church are like, I wish Pastor Matt would come and visit me. No, you really don't, because Jim is one of the guys that does it. Man, you're going to feel so loved by Jim coming. And if I come up, it's like he was a little like, I don't know, just I'm a little black and white, and so I don't fit some.
You're
of
gonna die.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about that,
Not
but
that
yeah. But it's just interesting. I think oftentimes in leadership, people tell you that you need to build up your weaknesses to be even with your strengths.
Right.
And that's actually not the case. The idea is you got to staff your weaknesses.
Yes, there you go. That's
and then
a good
develop your strengths. And so my strengths lie in leadership. My strengths lie in vision casting and big picture. And so if I can spend my time honing in the big picture and honing in leadership, and then the stuff that I'm not so great at, I outsource that. That's where all the volunteers come into place. So we have a vision. I have a vision to help everybody find their gift, find what they're good at, and get them doing that. Right? Like how much fulfillment do you find in life when you know, like, hey, I'm really good at this, and now I get to go do that. And so if you're not good with kids, if you don't like kids, I don't want you serving in our kids department. You right? Like
right, of course.
Absolutely. If you're an introvert, I don't want you as a greeter.
Right.
If you are lacking in mercy and compassion, which I would fall into some of that category.
Right.
I don't want you going to the hospital visiting people. Like let's find the shape that you are and then find the hole that you fit in, and let's make that work. And that's absolutely the case in business with your employees. You got to be able to say, well, here's the staff that I have, and maybe Susie needs to move from one department to another in order to be able to maximize who she is, and sometimes we get frustrated as leaders where we get frustrated with our staff and our employees or the people who are around us, and oftentimes the frustration is just a misfit of who that person is the role that they're fulfilling.
Right.
It's not that they're unvaluable. It's not that they're not good at something. They're just not good at what you're asking them to do.
Right.
So let's get them doing what they're really good at. And most of the time I'm blown away when you get the right person in the right role at just how impactful and how effective they are in what they do. Yeah,
that's really, really good. Business owners, I hope you heard that. It's so funny. We've all took the tests. We all do that. But especially when it comes to a business owner, that whole idea of moving people around, a lot of times we just are so quick to fire someone. Instead of actually, because you have 200. You said 280 volunteers,
something like that.
Yeah. So you can't just walk around and start firing everybody all the time.
Right. Well, and the church isn't the building.
Right.
The church isn't the organization. Like technically, I think we're incorporated. Right. We're not. It's not an incorporated entity.
Right.
The church is the people. Your business is the people.
Yes, that's good.
Your business is the people. Sure, you have an incorporated entity to protect yourself legally in the structure. I got that too at the church.
Right.
Right. Like if somebody sues the church, my personal home isn't going to be in jeopardy, or my car. Right. Like if somebody sues the church, but which I hope they don't ever do. But but still, we have the organizational structure, and you've got that too. You've got the sign on the building. Guess what? I got a sign on my building too. I got customers. I got people coming and go. But my organization is the people. Your organization is the people.
That's good.
And
I love
so
that.
to just run around firing people and this is not healthy at the end of the day. To be running around firing people nonstop, and the people who stay after you fire people nonstop creates great insecurity inside of those people, and then those people don't give 100% of their effort because they don't feel safe. You end up with less effectiveness out of your existing people because the insecurity you're creating as the leader.
The wrong culture, yeah.
It's a cultural piece, yeah, absolutely.
So let's get into that a little bit, because I want you to help new entrepreneurs. So maybe they've just started out, they have 4, 5, 6 employees, Pastor Matt, and they're looking at adding more employees. They're a brand new leader. Like, let's say, how do you mentor your new leaders in your church, and how would that help a new entrepreneur trying to lead?
Wow. So a new entrepreneur trying to lead. There's a few things. One of them would be surround yourself, your inner circle of people, surround yourself with the right people. So many times we think our inner circle is by default. It's by proximity. It's because I went to high school with this person. Why are you friends with the people that you're friends with is a question I would ask as a new entrepreneur. Who's your inner circle? Who are the voices you listen to? Because oftentimes my dad used to say this, show me your friends and I'll show you your future.
Right.
Right. And friends are like an elevator. They're going to take you up or they're going to take you down. They're not going to leave you the same. And so your inner circle matters. It matters in a huge way. Now, your inner circle may not be your employees. It may or may not, depending on the business that you're in. But your inner circle is what's going to give you the strength to be able to move forward. And so I would say, as a new entrepreneur, make sure your inner circle are people who are voices that are positive, who believe in you, who think that you can make it, who believe that you can make it in what you're doing. So many times our inner circle ends up being a default from friends, from something.
Oh, right.
You know what I mean? Like
Right.
I had one of my friends in high school is because I sat next to him in science. Right. And we became friends.
Right.
Like, just because you sat next to him in science your senior year, and then now he's your friend, and now you're going to start a business, and now he's going to be your inner circle. Just because he sat next to you in science 8 years ago doesn't make him qualified to be your inner circle in your business.
That's good. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like I and you see it, the ups and downs. You see this in professional sports a lot, where someone who's a hotshot quarterback makes it to the NFL, and then their circle around them is what gets them into trouble.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Michael Vick is a classic example. Phenomenal quarterback. He ended up playing for the Eagles. He got busted with some weird dogfighting ring and went to prison, right?
Right.
What does dogfighting have to do with the NFL? Like, he doesn't need the money. What's he doing? His inner circle from high school stayed with him all the way through. And sometimes you have to do a friendectomy. Cut off the friends and not that you're cutting them off. You just need to intentionally move them from your inner circle to your outer circle, or to a middle circle of influence in your life. So this is what I would say to a new entrepreneur. Your inner circle matters. Be intentional about who is your inner circle, because show me your friends and I'll show you your future. If you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
That's good. Yep.
Right? Like I am not the smartest pastor in town. I can guarantee you that. And when my inner circle of people that are pastors and leaders in my life, I am not the biggest church. I am not the biggest, smartest, fastest, anything in the room. I have people in my inner circle who are a few steps ahead of me in life. Don't find yourself in the place where you're the furthest along in your inner circle. You need to have people in your mentorship is kind of a hot word right now.
Right.
So weird to walk up to someone and say, will you be my mentor? Right? It's so weird. I just, just make them your inner circle and just be their friend, and you will get mentored by them,
Right.
And then one day you can say they're my mentor. So that's one thing, is your inner circle. I think that matters more than people put credit to it. And the second thing I would say is this: do consistently what other people do occasionally. Do consistently what other people do occasionally. It's not the big flashy moments that bring you success in what you're doing. It's the things behind the curtain that nobody sees that you do every day.
I like that.
Going to the gym once a week and eating like crap isn't going to help you have, a bodybuilder physique. It's not going to help you with your way you look. You can't do it occasionally. You can't eat healthy once a week and go to the gym. You got to go to the gym every single day, 5-6 days a week, work out really hard.
Right.
You got to watch your meal. What you do consistently will get you success. So as an entrepreneur, what do you do consistently right now? What do you do consistently? Because that's what you're going to be successful in. If you're consistently playing video games instead of dealing on your business, you're going to be successful at the video games and not your business, right? What you're consistently and with discipline working on, that's what you're going to find success in. So sometimes we look at the Instagram, we look at the Snap, we look at whatever it is, and we see the highlight reel of somebody else's life. But if you want the highlight reel, you've got to do the behind the scenes work to get those kinds of highlight reel results in your life. So the new entrepreneur, guard your inner circle, be selective on who you put there. And the second thing I would say is be consistent with your disciplines.
That's really, really good. Can you talk a little bit about discipline? Because I know that entails, not only just with an entrepreneur, but, there's disciplines in your life. If you're a person of faith, there's disciplines that you have to do, like prayer and, reading your Bible and, all these different things that we take for granted, habits, but disciplines. Can you go a little bit into discipline?
Absolutely. So discipline, and my definition is doing the things that you don't want to do, like in the basic form.
Right. That's perfect. Yeah.
Like I don't want to eat salad. What I want to eat is that big burger, right? And I want to eat. I want to drink a couple.
I haven't ate all day either, so this is sounding perfect.
I'm hungry. I want some Taco Bell. I want some hamburgers. I want to drink a couple beers. Like I want to. But it's like if you do those things, the negative impact on your body, right? That it's like, well, I shouldn't do that very often, but the next day it's like, man, it hasn't been a while, right? It's been 8 hours, so I'll do that again. I think discipline is doing things you don't want to do on a regular basis, or it's either stopping something or starting something.
Oh, okay.
It's stopping something that you don't want to do, or that you shouldn't do, or starting something that you don't want to do. I think those are the two, probably the main categories of discipline. So there's a physical side of your body. Everybody acknowledges that. There's an emotional, mental side of your body, and that there's that piece there. And then, of course, as a pastor, I'll tell you that I believe there's a spiritual side of your body as well.
Right.
So there is what I would call your soul, which is mind, will, emotions, thoughts, processes. There's your body, and there's your spirit. So you have those three sides of you, and so you've got to be able to develop all three of those sides, and it requires discipline to do that. So what are you feeding yourself? And what are you starving yourself from? What are you putting in? What are you not putting in?
That's a great question, because you could do that on all three of those.
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. Your thoughts, like in your soul, what are you thinking about? Have you ever stopped and just thought, what am I thinking about? Think about what you're thinking about. Because your thoughts start to cultivate an atmosphere inside of your brain, inside of your emotions, and all of a sudden your emotions will lead you to places that maybe in your mind that aren't right, that you shouldn't go to, but emotionally you're drawn to a certain place. Well, the seeds that you've planted that are growing into the plants that you don't want to have in your life those seeds are the thoughts that you have going on, right? So think about what you're thinking about. Spiritually speaking, are you praying? Are you cultivating that? Are you praying? Are you reading the Bible? I mean, those are disciplines that I would have in my life. That I would encourage everybody to have in their life, of course, as a pastor. You got to cultivate that. So I spend a certain amount of time in the morning praying and reading the Bible. I also spend a certain amount of time in my mornings reading things that would be considered self-help type stuff. I read a lot of books, and I listen to podcasts. Very few of my books and podcasts are necessarily Christian. Some of them are, but many of them are not, because I just know that truth is truth, and I've got to be able to feed myself that. what you're putting in.
So in the morning, you discipline yourself in the morning, just like you would a devotional or anything like that. You're disciplining yourself to feed your mind before you get busy.
Absolutely. Right. So I believe you got to set yourself up in the beginning of the day to win the day.
I love that.
And so in order to win your day, because if you want to win in life, you got to break it down to the basics. And so you got to win a day. Can you just win one day? If you're losing all over the place, if you're out of control, pick one day that you're going to win this week. Pick Monday, pick Tuesday, pick whatever day. Pick it and say, I'm going to win that day. And then when you're winning that day, you can expand it beyond, right? Until I'm now winning 2 days a week, 3 days a week. I'm winning 4 days a week. And define what that win's going to be and do it. And so, for me, I'm going to win the day. So that means this. I'm going to work out. I actually work out 1 hour every day. I work out 6 days a week. And
wow.
So, yeah, and you wouldn't know it, but I work out 6 days a week, but my eating habits aren't great. So it kind of counteracts each other. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so, they even say like 80% is diet or whatever. I have the same problem, but because I'll work out. I just got back from doing jiu-jitsu just like an hour ago. So I'll do all this working out, and then I'll be like, that snickerdoodle
because I earned it.
Was on the counter.
I earned it, right? I just worked out an hour. I earned that junk food.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a neutral thing here. I'm not gaining or losing, but
so winning the day for me would be eating clean.
Right. So pick a day of the week and say I'm gonna win my Thursdays. Start small. Like just pick one day you can win. If I can win one day, and maybe over a month or 2 or 3, you realize I can win every Thursday. And so what are the disciplines that you need to put into your life to win that day? And eventually over time, I believe everybody can grow to the place where they're winning every day.
Right.
But don't put that pressure on yourself. So I see this all the time in the faith community. People will say, well, I'm going to read my Bible and read, 2 chapters of the Bible every day.
Right.
But they miss Wednesday. So on Thursday, they think, oh, God must be angry at me now, which he's not. Please, believe me, he's not. So now I got to read 4 chapters because I got to make up yesterday's, and I'm going to pray like lots of, I'm so sorry, God type prayers.
It's like a performance-driven thing. Yeah.
Right? Yeah, it becomes a performance-driven thing. And then it's like, now I'm going to read 4 chapters to make up for yesterday. And it's like, just, you didn't win yesterday. Okay. Jesus died on the cross for that too. Just write it off and be like, I'm going to start fresh today.
I love that. Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of a fresh start guy every day. Wake up. Okay, what's today and how can I win today? I screw up stuff all the time. And I got to wake up in the morning and be like, okay, God, that was yesterday.
Right.
And so God, I need you to help me win today. And here's the 3 things or 4 things that I believe that I need to win today.
Oh, I love that because and I know you can talk about this too, but for leaders and business owners, you need to have that in your business because there's an aspect of forgiveness. Yeah. And walking up to an employee and saying, I'm not worried about what happened yesterday. Today's a new day, and how are we going to win today?
Yep.
That's beautiful. How would somebody be able to demonstrate forgiveness to an employee that may have hurt them as an owner?
Boy. So I think forgiveness is a choice that you make in your own heart. And so, boy, that's a tough question. You got me there. I mean, ultimately, forgiveness is something that I think you choose to give yourself.
Right.
Most of the time people are angry or unforgiving of somebody else, what they did. And you're the one waking up every day with the angst inside of what that other person did, and the other person oftentimes doesn't even know they did it, or if they did know they did it, they've long gone forgotten about the action that they took.
Or like you said earlier, the seeds that you planted, the emotional seed. Yeah. That you planted, and now it's this big plant, and every time you go into work, you're seeing this person.
Yes.
And they don't even realize it or know. I think that's hugely important what you said there.
It is. So as the owner, as the business, as a manager, as the leader in the organization, you've got to be able to choose to forgive someone, even though they may never apologize for what they did. And then, of course, there may or may not be corrective action necessary, depending on.
And you've never, being a pastor, you've never had anybody angry at you, right?
Not today. Yes.
So you've never had to forgive.
So here's the thing, right? And this is what I found surprising going from business into being a pastor is, as a business owner, people have really high expectations of you. Like your employees have high expectations of you. There's a lot of pressure as a business owner. especially if you have multiple employees. If you have like 5 or 8 or 10 employees, well, there's 5 or 8 or 10 families now that are kind of depending on the income that you're providing. Those employees are kind of leaning on you to provide a stable work environment, and I mean, there's a lot of weight that comes with being a business owner, just from your employees and having to lead them. And until you're a business owner and you've sat in that chair, most people just will never get it. They'll just never fully understand what the weight of that is.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, I didn't think that would be the case as a pastor. How naive of me. I thought, well, I'll have a handful of employees just like I did in my other business. But the expectations that people put on me as a pastor is pretty unbelievable. Everybody has an idea.
24 hours, 7 days a week.
Yeah, well, and people have everybody has an idea of what a pastor is supposed to be. Right. They have something in their mind of what it's supposed to be. So I am in the business now of letting people down. And because they have expectations of me that when you really think about it and talk about it with them, they understand that it's not realistic. Right. But they think it's realistic until you start talking to them of like, you know.
I think churches may have set that culture up from a long time ago, like you know, in the 1940s and 50s when you had that strong leader at the pulpit, you know, yelling and screaming, and so you know, everybody kind of has this Superman mentality. Right. You know, and as a business owner, it's the same thing. You can't be that guy. So coming in and putting your culture, and I know you do this, Pastor, but coming in there and saying, hey, there's only one, and I know how you would say it, is there's only one person that we need to elevate here.
Right.
Other than that, we're not, you know, we're all equal.
Absolutely. Right. As a church, as a Christian church, we would say, hey, listen, we're all trying to be like Jesus, right? We're trying to live like, the phrasing we use at our place, it's different everywhere, I'm sure, but we say we want to live like Jesus and we want to share his love. So we want to live like this guy. He's our model. He's the point he's kind of like the standard, if you will, of what we're trying to live like. And if you look at how Jesus loved people, well, now we're trying to love people the same way because his love was pure. His love was perfect. Our love is oftentimes not, but we're trying our best. And so we have at least a goal to emulate, which is we have a life we're trying to live like and a love we're trying to share.
I wonder what it'd be like if you loved your employees. We talked about that earlier, but if you loved your employees like Jesus loved, that would be interesting to me.
That would be interesting, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I think, you know, when you look at what Jesus stood for, this is something that I'm challenged with personally. Is he cared about things that I struggle to care about sometimes. Right. If you look at what Jesus cared about, his number one care was for people. His heart was for people. People who didn't deserve love, he gave it to. Right. People that were outcast from society, he paid attention to. He cared for people that oftentimes I don't want to care for.
Right. We all get that way, yeah.
Right? Like you see people on the side of the road with signs and saying, you know, we'll work for food or I just need some help.
And you get angry, you know, and for me, I have to check myself because I'll get angry and be like, go to McDonald's, go get a job. You know?
Right, yeah, just go get a job, right? Right. Yeah, and of course, we don't know their story. We don't know what's going on. Right. But Jesus took the time out of his day to care for people who the rest of society said, well, we're not going to care for them. And I struggle with that. Right. You know, and that's hard. And then here's the other thing is Jesus didn't care about a few other things. And he didn't care about personal danger, right? Like, if you study the Bible and look at what Jesus did, he put himself in harm's way all the time, and he didn't care about personal danger. That was one. He didn't care about other people's opinions. He offended all of the Pharisees, all the religious people of the time. He offended them every day, all day long. They were constantly mad at him, so much so that they were looking for ways to kill him. So if you could imagine pastors coming together and coming up with plans to murder someone else, right? That's how much.
That's what was happening. That was another pastor.
Yeah, right. That's what was happening. They were convinced that they needed to murder this guy. They were trying to find ways to kill Jesus, and he was offending religious people all the time. He didn't care what anybody thought. In fact, if you're not offending a religious person, I just wonder if you're even doing anything really, you know?
Right.
And then the third thing that was fascinating was Jesus had a movement of people around him. He could have overthrown the local government if he wanted to and created a political movement that would have changed the culture and the society of that day. He had thousands and thousands of followers in his day. He could have harnessed that and created a political movement, but he didn't. He didn't care about politics.
Yeah, that's good. And he derived his power differently too. You know, like as business owners, we look at power and we think, let me try to conquer this, let me try to take this. And he came about it in a different way.
Yeah, he really did. It's interesting. And so as a pastor, of course, I look at those things and say, well, we're going to live like Jesus. We're going to share his love. And so we look at his life and say, well, man, what are the things that he cared about and didn't care about? And I got to say, so many times I don't know about you, but for me, it's always a wrestle to, is my political flag waving higher and stronger than my personal belief flag?
Wow, that's good. Yeah.
You know, you can be a Republican and still go to my church if you want to. You know, you can be a liberal and still go to a Democrat or,
right.
You know, liberal or conservative, or we actually have socialists to, you know, anarchists to everything in between in our church, you know, because we're not unifying under any sort of political affiliation.
Right.
I'm registered independent, and I always will be, for what I'm doing, because I know that I don't want my personal political flag to wave too strong, right? But so many times our political flag will wave so strong that people will understand your identity as a politically related rather than who you are as a person. And I don't know, we kind of just deviated quite a bit there from the topic. But.
No, this is perfect. We're going to take a break right now, and then we're going to come back, and we're going to get a little bit more. I want to nail down a little bit more with the leadership. I think this has been invaluable, and I thank you, Pastor Matt, but we'll be right back.
Join us this week for another episode of the Albuquerque Business Podcast with your host, Jason Rigby. Each week, he interviews leading local business leaders that inspire the vision and spirit in every entrepreneur, discussing strengths, weakness, strategies, systems, and the problems we can all solve together to fulfill a shared vision of a new future for Albuquerque. Listen or download this Sunday afternoon at 4 from your favorite podcasting app.
And we're back on the Albuquerque Business Podcast. Pastor Matt, I wanted to ask you a question. And it may be kind of a controversial question, but I love it anyways. If you had a magic wand, what would you change about churches in America?
Ooh, that's tough. So there's a lot of churches in America.
Right.
There are wide varieties of churches in America. There are on the spectrum, I would say that there's there's a really wide spectrum. So to say, gee, like that's a really tough question, but I would have to say this, that some of this is perception of what people think about churches, and some of this, and they think this because churches maybe have or had in the past performed this way. But if I had to choose a magic wand, I would say get back to the basics. Is really what go back, read your Bible, and just stick to the basics. Most of the time, I think church's problem is that they're trying to do some level 10 stuff when the level 1 stuff is really screwed up. And so if the foundation isn't solid, which is, again, back to business, I think if your basics aren't solid, and then you try to build from there, you know, the level 2, level 3, the higher up you go, the further you build the organization, if your foundation isn't strong enough. So I think a lot of churches have just maybe neglected their foundation, and they've built and built and built, and pretty soon they're doing things that people ask, why are we doing it? Well, because we've always done it that way. It's like, well, that's just how we do things. And I think sometimes we got to strip back and peel back the layers of the onion and get back to the basics and stop being religious and start being relational. We got to stop being religious and start being relational as churches. Jesus wasn't religious. He was relational.
Right.
He cared about people.
Right.
And so if as a church and as a leader and as an entrepreneur, sometimes we can get stuck in caring about the rules and caring about what's right and what's wrong, and we stop being relational and we lose the relational aspect. So in churches, I would say you got to stop being religious, get relational. Get relational to those who don't look like you, those who don't act like you, don't have the same skin color as you.
I like that.
Big one is don't vote like you. Like you know what I mean? Can you be friends with somebody who doesn't vote like you?
It used to be that way.
People used to
be. I could be liberal, you could be conservative, vice versa, and we could talk to each other, and we would have, you know, I mean, I'd sit across the fence from you, and we'd sit there and talk. You're Bill, I'm Jim, and you know but now it's just so. What do you think? Why is there so much anger now, on both sides?
I think people have turned their identity into the wrong things. Like their identity isn't who they are anymore. It's what they believe and what they do, and I don't know, man. Like it's hard. We basically start drawing really large lines in the sand about who people are, especially the ones we don't understand. Like this is what happens the most, right? Is that people will sit on one side of their situation, look at the other side. They don't understand it. And so then they lead into this. They start to categorize people into certain categories based on whatever parameters that they don't understand. Maybe it's sexual orientation. That's a hot one with people in the church right now, right? Like,
of course, right.
Like, well, gee, if whatever your sexual preference is, or sexual identity, or gender identity, all those types of things, right? So they don't understand it, which is typically what happens. They start to categorize people, and then same with politicians. In political, like if you're a liberal, people look at the conservative end, or if you're conservative, look at the liberal end, or maybe economic status too. People who are maybe in a lower income bracket look at high income earners, and they categorize them as the quote 1%, right? Like you see that, and then what they do is they categorize people, and then they demonize them. Every time.
Yep.
They categorize them, they demonize them. As soon as you start categorizing people into lump sums and groups, I've never seen someone categorize and elevate them. I've never seen it. They always categorize and demonize, and then they say, oh, you're one of those people. Right. And then they list off everything that's wrong with, quote, those people. And churches are notorious for being so loud and noisy about everything that they're against.
Oh, right.
Everything they're against. We're against this. We're against that. We're against the other thing. Listen, I can tell you that churches probably need to stop talking about what they're against, because everyone in the world probably knows already by now what they're against. Right. Like nobody's going to be surprised at what the Bible says about whatever topic, because the church has been very loud and vocal about what they're against. You know, churches probably need to start talking a whole lot more about what they're for.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm not against this. Here's what I'm for. I'm going to stop talking about what I'm against. You know, I'm going to start talking about what I'm for. This happens in business too. I'm going to tell a quick story about.
No, go ahead.
I was looking for a gym, and so I went and looked, and it's a local business here in Albuquerque, and a lady owns this gymnasium. She owns 2 gyms, and I'm not going to say her name, and so I went over and I started asking about, you know, what's your program like? What do you guys do here? And at least half the time was the business owner telling me, listing off her competition and telling me everything that was wrong with them, and why they're terrible, and why they're not good, and why this is bad. And it's like, man, you know, I walked out of there, and I don't even know what she said that was good about her own business, because she said so much bad things about the other business. And it just stuck with me. I was like, I don't care how good she is or isn't, or how good her business is or isn't at this point, because she's so negative about everybody else. And so, listen, you don't need to be so loud about what you're against. Just be loud about what you're for. Yeah,
and I think you know what's amazing to me, that same anger that everybody has.
Yeah.
To me, that same anger is the same anger that probably killed Jesus, I would imagine.
Probably.
Yeah. You can see, I could just imagine those religious people in that day just looking at him and being so angry, you know. And you can see that on the left and the right. You watch those, I'm on Twitter a lot, and I watch those videos, and there's just the yelling, the screaming, the red face. Yeah.
You know, it used to be in the political world, they would go out and they would argue on the floor, and then after their little debate was done, they go, "What do you want to eat for dinner?" And they go out and eat dinner together, right?
Right.
And they had enough maturity in themselves to be like understanding the difference between what they're fighting for and who they are.
Right.
But it's like identity politics, right? Like and not that that's necessarily bad, because I know the left typically gravitates on like identity politic type buttons, and I'm not saying that isn't valid by any stretch, but people have lost their own identity into that, you know. You know what I mean? I think churches have done the same thing. Right. Is that, well, I'm a Baptist, and so here's what I believe, you know, with my denomination, and you're an Assemblies of God church. Well, your denomination's doing it wrong, you know, or you're a Presbyterian and you're doing it wrong. Right. And so they draw these hard lines in the sand with even between different like denominations within the Christian faith or the Catholic faith or any sort of faith in God. Like people start drawing these really hard lines, and they start making divisions over things that are so minor. In fact, if you really look at just everything in life, people divide on very minor things. At the end of the day, most people have the same end goal.
Yes, you're right. Yeah, exactly.
They just disagree on how to get to that goal. Right. Most of the time.
Yeah, that makes sense. And if you come to a meeting, like a business meeting that way,
yeah,
you know, thinking that,
yep,
you're going to have a lot better response than being defensive.
For sure. Like the shipping department is really mad at the warehouse department because, they're screwing up their stuff, right? They're messing up their game. They're like, you're doing it wrong. You got to do it this way. You got to do it that way. And so this is where I had to grow in this area, moving from business into pastoring, is that keeping everybody focused on the big picture and on the main focus and the main goal of what the organization is aiming for. Right. So at the end of the day, you're trying to ship products. You're trying to sell products to be able to ship and deliver them so you have happy customers. Right. And so your sales department's selling, your warehouse is warehousing, and your shipping is shipping. And the win for the organization is that the customer receives their product, what they ordered, not broken, and in a short time period. Right. That's the win. And so if warehouse is doing something that makes it difficult for shipping, rather than shipping coming back and just hammering them, it should be like, well, hey, listen, we're trying to help the customer, and we're hitting a stumbling block. And now everybody's focused on the same goal. And I know you can't see me, and so this makes it difficult to illustrate. But when you have opposing parties that have lost their vision and have lost the goal of what they're aiming for, what you have is people if you can picture it, people on opposite sides of the table facing each other, and the problem is in the middle of the table. And although they think they're attacking the problem, the collateral damage is they're shooting each other in the process of trying to aim at the problem. The bullets are ricocheting off the problem and hitting the other person, right? Right. That makes sense. So when you can get everybody on your team on one side of the table and put the problem in the middle of the table, when everybody's attacking the problem, the collateral damage is not another person on your team. Right. You're all in the same position, shooting the same direction.
It's easier to go, and this is another Jesus reference, but it's easier to go after the person than it is to go after the problem.
It totally is, isn't it?
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, when we look at that, we've all seen the scapegoat, the person that's been wrongly fired. Yep. And then we've all seen, and then how quick are we to jump sides or to jump on and the bandwagon and take that hatred, and instead of actually sitting down and finding out, all three sides of the story. Yep. We just go with our narrative and run with that, and then we're off to the crucifying, one of our employees, so.
Yeah, we see that in business. People create like silos within their departments, and those silos, they become very territorial. Right. You see it in politics. I think that's part of the problem right now in politics, is that everybody's so siloed and territorial. Right. They don't want to lose power or control or influence in what they're doing. And so they fortify their positions, and it's the same thing in churches. You see it all the time. And so if I could wave a magic wand and make that go away, oh man, I would. I would.
Everybody, all the churches in America, back to the basics.
Man, that would be amazing. I don't know how that's even required. That would be a miracle. Forget turning water into wine. That would be the miracle.
That's awesome. So a little bit about churches staying in the past, because we have this with business here. I talked to a business leader the other day. I'm here in the community. He's like, well, I don't need to do this or this or this. My business is fine. I've done this and I've stayed that way, and, I'm doing okay, but they don't realize that 3, 5, 10 years from now, they probably won't be in existence. We've all seen a Blockbuster. Yep. We've all seen those. What can, in your opinion, Pastor, what can churches do to get out of the past? And then how could a church handle this new, whether we like it or not, we have a new world that is coming into existence?
Yeah, there's probably the biggest fundamental shift in communication in human history, I think maybe ever. I think the printing press was a pretty big one, a big fundamental shift. Right. Yeah, I think this is bigger, and it's coming faster than anything that's ever come before. In 2007, the iPhone was invented, right? And it originally launched in 2007, and so it was that 12 years ago. So in 12 years, the smartphone industry has changed. Everybody has a smartphone. Well, nearly everyone has a smartphone. How that's so fast when you look at human history. Right. So the tidal wave of this new way of communicating it's coming fast. It's coming hard. And if you're not in it, and kind of the overreaching aspect of what that implication is like it's far reaching. It's not just I don't know how to even say it the right way, but like right now we're having a conversation in a studio, and our audience isn't here with us today.
No,
but there are people who are listening, right? And there are people who will be listening, and yeah, this might be next week or next month or next year, but for years and years and years, somebody might discover this recording somewhere,
right?
And our voices today will have an impact to who knows how many people over the course of time.
Right.
That was not an option that long ago.
No, you're exactly right. This is Albuquerque Business Podcast, and we'll get 6,000 streams. It's like, so that's so weird to me. It's like there's that many people in this city. Yeah,
right.
Today. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
we'll get
exactly.
6,000 right now.
Right.
Yeah. But as this podcast grows and as it gets more following, right? There was no way you could sit in a room with two people and have a conversation and have it reach thousands of people.
Right.
Even 10 years ago. That would be very difficult to have. You would have to have a massive...
That's a mega church,
right.
To have 6, 12, 15,000 people.
Correct. Yeah, it would be massive. So the shift is here. Mm-hmm. For people who say that I'm not sure if it's going to stick or not, it's here and it's not going anywhere. The change has happened. And so churches that don't adapt, and even businesses that don't adapt, it's good. They're going to get left behind. And so what will happen is, in the church world, I can at least say, to the business world, I'll be honest, I've been out of business for almost 5 years now, as far as having my own company. And the market has changed radically in 5 years. If I had to go back into business today, I would be a little intimidated just by the digital age and digital communication,
right.
because I know that it's grown so much just in the last 5 years. But for churches, I think part of it is having the motivation and the why behind making the decisions that you need to make in order to reach the world that we're in and the communication that we're in. The why matters, right?
Right.
You read the Simon Sinek book that says, start with why.
Right.
Very famous book. But you got to start with why. You got to know why you're going to do this. And so for a church, it's like, well, we're going to reach people for Jesus, right? That's kind of the motivation in a church world, right? And so you got to serve people right where they're at. And oftentimes pastors and religious leaders and church institutions will almost demonize the culture that we're in, or almost talk negative about the culture that we're in, because they don't fully understand it. They don't know how to reach it. They don't know how to do it. It's unknown to them. And human tendency is, if you don't know it, you criticize it, is the typical path. And so it gets criticized sometimes and end up burning bridges in the process. Pastors and churches are creating hurdles that are unnecessary for people because they are resisting what is already here.
Right.
They're already resisting what's already here. And so this is, when you talk about being stuck in the past, I think there's a few different avenues. One of them's music.
Right.
Like music today is different than it was 50 years ago, 30 years ago, 100 years ago. I love hymns. Like we sing,
same here. Yeah.
Like we'll sing a hymn in our church, which is written, 100 years ago or more.
Right.
But we actually do something to it. We actually put it in 4/4 time, like modern music time, because sometimes they're not in 4/4 timing. But we still have our guitars and our drums and our keyboards, and we're pretty modern. We have electric guitars, and we have, what would be considered very modern, contemporary style music, like you'd find anywhere else around town. But we'll still have all the modern instrumentation behind that music. And it's like, well, you could play it the way it was written, and for people who are familiar with that, they're going to like it. But people who don't know it, it's going to be very foreign to them.
Right.
And so creating like music, everywhere you look at music and the way it's played, if you watch it on TV, if you go to the bar downtown, anywhere you go, a couple of things you'll notice. Number one, it's a little bit loud.
Right.
The second one you'll notice is that the room is dark, and there are colored lights on the stage, and they almost always have like a haze machine or some sort to help with the lighting, atmospheric effects. And people, you look at the environment that's there, but then you go to a typical church, and that typical church doesn't do it that way. They play it in a weird way, right? They play it they'll have like
formal. You're right.
Very formal, right? And so what's funny is what's comfortable for the older Christian is the old formal way of playing music. But for the person who's far from God, who's never been to church or doesn't understand it, it is so uncomfortable the way that churches will play music.
Right.
Everywhere else that somebody experiences music, the lights are a certain way, everything else is a certain way, and in church is the odd one out. And so you look at like churches that are stuck in the past with music, or maybe like attention spans, right? Like you'll hear maybe older generations maybe say, oh, these young kids these days, they can't pay attention for very long, right? And it's like, well, you're right, they can't. So okay, that's fine. Mobile phones, apps for phones, texting, communications.
But I got something to say that it's interesting. I was talking to an older guy that, I don't mean to interrupt you, but a lot of young people will watch and listen to Joe Rogan because he has podcasts. Joe Rogan, it's the top podcast out there. I have a podcast, so he had Elon Musk on there, and all these different famous people he has on there, whatever. They're average 3 hours.
Wow.
And these young kids will watch it for 3 hours on YouTube.
Wow.
So it's interesting to me. Is it a blame of attention span, or is it the content that we're putting out?
Right. So that's what I would say to churches who are maybe stuck in the past and having a hard time is, and I'm going to throw the whole Bible thing down because in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, it says this in the Bible. It says, Paul is talking about becoming all things to all people,
right,
and to being relatable to people. And he says, to the weak I became weak, that I might win the weak. I have become all things to all people, that by all things I might save some. So I do it for the sake of the gospel, that I might share it with them in its blessings. Paul, major author in the New Testament, is saying,
next
listen,
to Jesus, yeah.
I'm going to adjust my methodology, Paul.
Right.
I'm going to adjust my methodology, but to reach those who, you got to speak the language of people that are your audience, right? If the attention span is, quote, too small, they're not paying attention to you, right? Well, you got to adjust your format because you're either not good at what you're doing, and so they're losing attention, or you are too long, or you know what I mean? Adjust your music, adjust your, the methods need to change in order for the message to be received.
I like that. That's good.
Right? The methods have to change for the message to be received. And I just, for churches that are stuck in the past, I'm telling you, it's not going to get any easier. It's not going to get any better. You've got to adjust to be able to communicate on today's language and frequencies for people to be able to understand and be able to hear you and receive it.
Right.
And we get stuck to our methods sometimes. Churches are famous for getting stuck to their methods.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask you this, Pastor. What does your church here in Albuquerque, what is the future hold for your church?
Well, a couple of things. One of them is that we're trying to reach the next generation. So we say that we're all ages reaching for the next generation. We're all working at it. We're reaching, looking at it, adjusting our methods and everything like that, and to be able to reach the next generation. But here's the other thing that is probably different than most churches, and that's this, is that we're trying to create a financially sustainable solution for our church. And so I'm taking what I believe God has given me as a gift in entrepreneurial business skills and applying it to the church nonprofit world. And so if you go to our church, this isn't a secret. If you go to our church and you see it, it's called City Church, and the signs are all City Church. If you drive around the back side of the building, you're going to see a sign that says City Storage. And behind us is this giant storage facility. And so 2 years ago, I looked at all the vacant land we had behind our building that wasn't usable as church building because of the way that it's shaped and done.
Right.
So we started a storage company. It's a separate business.
Right.
It's called City Storage. You can park your motorhome and your RV, your trailer back there.
Right.
And we have a bunch of customers and clients. We have a giant warehouse with a bunch of tenants in there. And so we've subdivided everything down, and we have a bunch of tenants, and they're all renting from us right now. And all that money is eventually funneled back to the church to help the church. The church owns the business entirely. I don't own any of the business or the church. The church owns the business, and the business creates a positive revenue. That's a for-profit business that a nonprofit owns. So we had to work with our legal team to make it all structured the right way. Right. But we have this thing set up to where it is now covering a significant portion of our budget. So our vision is this, is that...
I like that.
Yeah, well, the vision is this, is that what would it look like if a church were to be able to tell their congregation, hey, listen, instead of saying 80% of our budget goes to keep the bills paid, the mortgage, the lights, the utilities, that's not sexy. Nobody wants to give money to that.
Right.
But what if we flipped it and said, listen, only every 20% of the dollars you give goes to overhead, 80% goes to actually making an impact in our community. Like, what would that look like to be able to say, listen, I know you're going to give $100 today, or whatever it is that someone's going to give.
Right.
And be able to say, well, $80 of what you're giving is actually going to be used to feed homeless people, put clothes on kids that are living in poverty, that are going to stock backpacks at the beginning of the year and be able to do that. So we thought, wouldn't it be phenomenal as a nonprofit, our business side skills, or the business bills, I would say, are being covered by the business ventures that the church owns, so that now all of the money that comes in through donations, what you call it tithes and offerings in the church world, but the donations that would come in would then be used directly going into ministry rather than having to cover overhead.
Wow, that's amazing.
Wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah. I wonder if churches are even thinking about that.
Well, I think there's a tidal wave coming, and that churches are not prepared for. And we're trying to get ahead of that.
Right.
And so one of them is that churches have been really blessed with a nonprofit status, and they haven't had to pay taxes on very much of anything. And because people are donating to help it fund and operate, right? We're actually seeing this in some parts of the country where churches are losing some of their non-profit stuff. So some of the taxes that they had previously not had to pay, they're now having to pay again in different areas of the country.
Right.
And so certain counties are saying, well, no more property tax exemption. You got to pay property tax on your property for your church building.
Wow.
And so so a lot of these churches have been around for 100 years, and they've owned the property outright, and they haven't had to pay property taxes on it. So now they got to pay property taxes at whatever it's valued today. And so there are churches now that are having to sell their buildings and to developers and stuff because they can't even afford the taxes on their own church building anymore.
Wow, that's amazing.
It's happening, right? And so there's a day coming where I think, and I might be wrong, but I speculate that there may be a day coming where the portion of dollars that nonprofits use for overhead would be considered taxable. And the portion of dollars that nonprofits use to actually make the impact in the community would become non-taxable.
Yeah. So you're right. Yeah. So you would want to have something that's sustainable.
Right. Sustainable model. Like we pay property taxes. We pay property taxes on the portion of the property that is used for the business.
Right.
We pay income taxes. That is like a full normal for-profit business that has all the tax implications of a typical for-profit business. But it still makes a profit, and it still helps fund the church in some ways. But I think that there's a day coming, and we're starting to see this happen in some areas of the country already, where nonprofits are going to be facing tax liability issues that they've never had to face before. And so we're trying to get ahead of that as the future of our church and say, listen, what if we built a church that was financially sustainable, that the donations didn't cover the light bill or the power bill or buying toilet paper for the bathroom, but the donations went to ministry. I don't know if we could ever get to 100% donations to ministry.
Right.
But man, that'd be phenomenal.
Yeah. That's I've never thought of that before, and that's interesting. I think you're onto something there. As far as, because everything is put all. I would imagine a lot of it is put back into the actual organization as it's growing. As you're building more buildings, as you're improving everything that you have to improve, and then you've got we always joke about the Sunday morning show, and you've got lights and people, and I mean, so to be able to take that and have that business take care of a lot of that, then that's not when somebody is giving their donation, then they know that money's going to help the community. That's amazing.
Yeah, wouldn't it be great to go like, listen, when you're giving today, it's not covering the hard bills, like the pastor isn't paid through your donation.
Right. Yeah, right? That's wild.
Wouldn't that be crazy?
Yeah.
Because right now, when someone gives money to our church, some percentage of that is actually going to me. I mean, I get a salary from the from the church.
Which every pastor does.
Yeah, right. With their budget, they have a budgeted amount of money they're expecting or hoping to get, and but wouldn't it be great to be able to say, well, listen, we've budgeted the hard costs off of the for-profit arm of what we do. I mean, I'd be just fine, if the entire church was taxed if it was like a for-profit entity. You know what I mean? Like how we're doing now, like most of our property is actually used for for-profit entities, and so we have so I think that there's something coming, and so we're trying to get ahead of that
That's good.
And build an organization that can weather the storm of that. And economic ups and downs, because when you look at, economic ups and downs, when there's recessions in our country, people's generosity typically dips.
Right, of course, right.
Yeah, so giving to, United Way or to a church or to the homeless shelters or whatever it might be, when people's pocketbooks get a little tight, that's typically the first thing they pull back on. And so, which ironically is the season when the city actually needs it more than ever, because there's more people in need.
Yeah, right, exactly.
It's ironic, but yeah, that happens. And so we thought, well, how can we weather the storm of economic up and downs? How can we weather the storm of potential tax liabilities or laws changing in that way? And plus, how could we, not only that, but how could we also move our church forward into the future to where we're able to be a bigger blessing and have more impact in our city? How many more people could we feed? How many more people could we clothe? How many more kids could we help and families in need? And you start looking at, because we do a lot of that now, but how much more could we do?
Right.
If we didn't have these other bills.
Yeah, that's interesting. I really love that. Well, we're going to wrap it up here really quick. I want to ask you one more question. Are there any tools or books, Pastor Matt, that's helped you not just on your journey, but you feel like would help an entrepreneur?
Absolutely. So I got 3 books. So number 1 is the Bible.
Right.
Yeah. Got to throw that in there.
That's good. Yeah.
Number 2 is actually the same author. There are 2 books that I recommend all the time from a guy named John Maxwell, and he has a bunch of books on leadership, and so there's 2 that I really love. One is called The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, and he has it's 21 or 3 chapters, but there's a chapter in each of the laws of leadership, and if you could master each of those, holy cow, that would make a big. I'm a long way. And then the one that had probably the most profound effect on my life, I've read hundreds and hundreds, maybe not thousands of books, but the one book that had probably the biggest impact on my life was also from John Maxwell, and it's called Talent is Never Enough. Talent is never enough, and it speaks to the thing of consistency and discipline, and says the tortoise and the hare.
Right.
The tortoise is going to win the race because he's consistent and disciplined, and the hare is going to be a flash in the pan. And in today, especially when entrepreneurship is considered sexy right now.
Right. Yeah. Of course,
it's hot right now. Everybody's like,
right.
I'm an entrepreneur.
Right.
Everybody's an entrepreneur, and it's considered sexy. But I'm telling you, what's going to last the test of time is that if you can be consistent and disciplined. That book, I would say, that's probably one of the biggest books that changed my life.
You guys get that on your Amazon Kindle now. What is your? Will you tell us what your Instagram is again?
Absolutely. So my Instagram is Matthew Williams, and then the church Instagram is CCABQ is the church Instagram. Yep.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Pastor Matt Williams, for being on the Albuquerque Business Podcast today. Please rate this and review us. That's how we move forward here locally with you guys. You can also go to our website, abqpodcast.com. You can download this podcast on Spotify, iTunes. And make sure that you never miss an episode. Next week, we've got another special guest that'll be happening, and I'm going to be releasing 4 extra podcasts. So we're getting out there and we're moving here in Albuquerque. Thanks, and have a great day.
Thank you for joining us on the Albuquerque Business Podcast. And thank you to our sponsor, DukeCityMarketing.com. Please go to abqpodcast.com, where you can get show notes, resources, and links to everything we talked about today to help you navigate your journey as an entrepreneur and business owner in Albuquerque.